Today I am going to be reading you a passage from the book Cold War 2.0, Dawn of the Asian Millennium. Section 5, Mass Migrations. No one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. Warsan Shire, British writer, poet, editor, and teacher. Until the second half of the 20th century, it was uncommon for men, women, and children to cross the Mediterranean Sea from North Africa to arrive in Europe. I am not referring to the raids that took place looking for European slaves, but of migration. However, the Italians, French, Spanish, and Greeks, and other Europeans did escape to North Africa to avoid persecution or overpopulation in their respective nations. They looked for their fortunes in new soil, in the Maghreb, and the colonies overseas. Looking back on the events of the 19th century, we see how the world went through some incredible transformations. European powers dominated the economies of Africa, their colonization in full swing, and, with it, came waves of settlers. Just before the outbreak of World War I, European colonists numbered 1 million in Algeria, a nation with a native population of about 9 million at the time. After the devastations of World War I and World War II that took the lives of millions of men, Europe encouraged North African immigration so it can rehabilitate its shattered economic bases. Shortages in the workforces led to a desire for immigration, to help rebuild the former colonial powers. This was the beginning of what some described as an invasion, while others consider it the so-called Great Replacement theory. This migration of people into Europe began as the result of constructed economic dependence upon the exploitation of cheap labor. Now, it has been accelerated by political instability, climate change, lack of access to resources, religious strife, and globalization. From Asia and Africa to Europe, South and Central America to North America, and even remote islands in the Pacific, millions of people are on the move due to climate change, wars, politics, and more. As human population began to skyrocket about 200 years ago, the strains on natural resources have accelerated, with inequality being exacerbated by climate change. From March 14 to 15, 2019, a tropical storm, named Tropical Cyclone Idai, ripped through Mozambique. According to a World Vision report on March 5, 2020, it caused flooding and destroyed more than $773 million worth of buildings, infrastructure, and crops, as well as 100,000 homes. Incidents like this have become more commonplace in recent years, as humans continue to develop and proliferate. Since humans struggled to find equilibrium with nature, nature began to push back, leaving many with little to no options. In the wake of this and many other crises, in conjunction with a lack of resources, increasing population, and political and social instability, we begin to see massive migrations across the world. The purpose of this section is not to focus on the reasons behind the mass migrations as they are extensive and varied, but more so to explain the movements that are taking place and their impact. On March 19, 2018, the World Bank Group issued a report estimating that by 2050, more than 143 million people could be forced to migrate to other areas from just 3 regions in the world. Sub-Saharan Africa was expected to see the most refugees, followed by South Asia, and then Latin America. The report highlighted that the areas which would see the least water availability, crop productivity, rising sea levels, and extreme weather patterns would be the most affected. The current trend of migration was expected to continue to increase in the future. Another area expected to be hard hit was East Africa, home to some of the countries with the highest numbers of refugees today. While climate refugees often flee under similar conditions as traditional refugees, the current legal perspectives do not afford them the same rights and protection. Currently, there are no multilateral strategies or legal frameworks which recognize climate change as a driving factor behind human migration. The UN High Commission for Refugees has refused to grant refugee status to climate refugees. Instead, they have classified them as environmental migrants and are essentially ignored by governments. This lack of clarity regarding the definition of these people has allowed human trafficking and crime networks to thrive in their desperate quest to survive. In an article from Time magazine on December 1, 2017, we read about African migrants being sold as slaves for $400 in the markets of Libya. Libya, which is on the north coast of Africa, and has become the main transit port for refugees and migrants seeking a better life. Over the past several years, thousands of migrants have drowned trying to make it across to Europe. Some estimates put the number of people being bottled up in Libya between 400,000 and 1 million trying to avoid being robbed, kidnapped, raped, or murdered. In 2007, the International Organization for Migration estimated 4.6 million African migrants were living in Europe, while the Migration Policy Institute claimed it could be as high as 7 or 8 million. Still, since then, these numbers have only increased. According to Leonard Doyle, the director of media and communications for the IOC, it's a total extortion machine. Fueled by the absolute rush of migrants through Libya thinking they can get out of poverty, following a dream that doesn't exist. Many have sold everything and left everyone they know behind, looking for a better life. In contrast, and in many ways, they escaped certain injustices and climatic events but are unable to integrate into European society. The Middle East, the cradle of modern civilization, is no stranger to large-scale warfare. Whether due to sectarian violence, lack of jobs, climate change, instability, or more, this region is also seeing widespread migrations. Of the top 10 countries applying for asylum in the European Union, by far, the leading countries were Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Given the Middle East's proximity to Europe, the continent became the obvious choice. As Western culture penetrated deeply into most, if not all, parts of the developing world, specific imaginary images about what life must be like in Western countries come to the forefront. Of the most popular routes taken by refugees and migrants into Europe, the vast majority transition through Turkey. Since then, until now in 2020, Turkey is using the millions of migrants they sheltered as leverage for billions of dollars and political concessions with the EU. The president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, even threatened Europe to open the floodgates of refugees if the EU dared to be critical of his military adventurism in Syria, Iraq, and Libya. This situation led Eastern European nations to take strong anti-refugee stances, increasing the popularity of nationalistic politicians across Europe. On the other side, Greece, which shares the border with Turkey and is the most accessible transit country, had been pushed to reinforce border controls with continued heated debates about erecting a wall along their borders. Europe has been taking in immigrants from the Near East for thousands of years, and even the current countries are no strangers to population shifts and migrations. However, the recent large waves of immigration and religious differences, along with media perceptions, have given Europeans negative opinions about migrants and refugees. The Pew Research Institute released data in 2016, showing that many Europeans were concerned that taking in more refugees would translate into domestic terrorism. Furthermore, most Europeans polled had negative views of Muslims in general. Regardless of the reasons for migrants coming into Europe, it has become obvious that the opinion of Europeans towards them is overwhelmingly negative. But Europe is not the first and only choice of the migrants and refugees from the Middle East. According to a report from Info Migrants on December 20, 2019, only 14% of all migrants from the Middle East had reached Europe. In a 2019 UNHCR report, titled Situation Report on International Migration 2019, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration in the context of the Arab region, Arab countries had also been experiencing unprecedented levels as a region of origin, transit, and destination of human migration in recent years. Since 1990, an estimated 38 million Arab nationals were living outside of their home country within the Greater Middle East region. In 2018, 2/5 of refugees worldwide, about 8.7 million, came from Arab countries, with almost 30% of them deciding to stay in the region. The number one destination for these people was found to be Turkey, with nearly 4 million non-residents estimated to be in the country. Furthermore, non-Arab Asian countries were found to be the origin of 56% of the migrants in Arab countries, mostly coming as migrant workers from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, etc. In Southeast Asia, population transfers date back thousands of years, with new arrivals being incorporated into the older culture. For instance, almost 20 million Chinese descendants are living in the Indochina region today. However, due to a wide variety of factors, including increasing populations and climate change, these migrations put strains on already limited resources. ResearchGate provided data on the complex importation and exportation of labor across Southeast Asia. According to a November 12, 2018, Inter-Sector Coordination Group report, there were so many refugees moving into Bangladesh that it caused a critical humanitarian emergency. In recent years, the Bay of Bengal witnessed the harmful displacement of people from Rohingya, causing them to flee to neighboring countries. To date, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has done little to address the situations concerning Bangladesh and Myanmar. Across ASEAN countries, labor migration has played an essential role in movements as well. Most of these migrants are low-skilled, often young, and have an equal distribution between males and females. These workers usually make their way to countries with, on average, older population, looking to fill some fundamental roles. They are usually hired to be housekeepers, teachers, construction workers, miners, nurses, farmhands, as well as handling any hazardous jobs. In a report issued by the Migrations Policy Institute on October 22, 2019, it was found that the demographics of migrants coming to North America was shifting. In the past, most migrants were from Latin American countries. However, in recent years, there was a stark increase of people from Africa, Asia, and the Middle East traveling via Latin American countries to North America. These people were referred to in the report as extracontinental migrants, which means they are not from the Western Hemisphere, and this was not noticed until recently. Furthermore, the number of extracontinental migrants moving in and through Latin America has increased so dramatically in recent years that it prompted targeted policy responses from some countries, including Panama, Colombia, and Costa Rica. Surprisingly, most extracontinental migrants entered the Western Hemisphere through legal means through visas. In some cases, permits were not even required. This gateway is due to the lax visa requirements of some countries, such as Brazil, Ecuador, and Guyana, which, in turn, make them convenient entry ports for human traffickers. However, their journey had only begun. The trip to the US or Canada could take months, if not years, often at the mercy of more smugglers, and traversing difficult terrain. Some of the common routes happened to cut right through some of the most dangerous drug cartel-held areas, nicknamed the Cocaine Express. Given how difficult this journey is, a report found that many decided to abandon their quest and settle in South America instead, either by choice or circumstance. And according to a Center for Immigration Studies report on August 13, 2018, and based on court records, the top 3 origins of special interest aliens coming to the US were from the Middle East, North and East Africa, and South Asia. For migrants traveling to the US and coming from the Middle East, they often went to Turkey and Greece, then to either European or the Gulf states, or took a southern route through South America, before migrating to the US. People from North and East Africa commonly went through the Gulf states, but sometimes passed through Europe. Meanwhile, others preferred to land in Latin American countries like Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, and Mexico City. On the other hand, those from South Asia often traveled via India, Singapore, the Gulf states, or South Africa. For a country like the US, which was founded upon immigration, it seemed ironic that they had become so concerned with immigrants as of late. While President Donald Trump was getting considerable criticism for his policies towards immigration, in practice, he did not differ much from Democratic President Barack Obama. In general, there has been building sentiment with US administrations against immigration, with US sentiment turning inwards. According to the UN report from 2015, the US already had the highest number of immigrants in the world, with a total of 47 million people, or about 14% of the country's population. Meanwhile, the number of undocumented immigrants was estimated to range from 10 to 12 million people, or about 3.2% to 3.6% of the country's population. In Europe, according to Eurostat statistics, an estimated 21.8 million immigrants were living in the Eurozone, or about 4.9% of the continent's population as of January 1, 2019. In 2018 alone, an estimated 2.4 million immigrants from non-EU nations entered the EU. Can the Western world handle more immigrants? Today, the US is looking more like a war zone than a sanctuary. As we have seen earlier in this book, Western nations have long declined in almost every area of ranking. Economically and financially, Western countries are on the verge of the worst depression ever seen, made worse by COVID-19 policies and its repercussions. As income inequality rises, so has the discontent which had sown the seeds of social unrest we are witnessing today. With each day, the calls for more socialist policies get more robust as those who feel left out want their piece of the pie. We are already witnessing supply chains become disrupted due to the restrictive movements and the protectionist policies of nations. Rising food costs will have a substantial effect on citizens, and this year, 2020, has had a tremendous impact on income. In the middle of this, the US, feeling the threat of its place for world dominance, and is seeking to alienate China. They are forcing nations to pick a side in a trade war that can only make things worse for all. All the while, Mother Earth is pushing back against us with diseases and climate change, causing disruptions and misery worldwide. In a future where access to water and food will become scarcer, it makes sense for whoever can move to make a better life. It is admirable for someone to work hard and make a better life rather than rely on handouts. But as we can see, it will not be the life we once had, it will be a new one we probably do not want. If you enjoyed this passage from the book Cold War 2.0 Dawn of the Asian Millennium, I suggest you pick up a copy from the Amazon link in the description. It is available in paperback and Kindle versions. If you enjoy this kind of content, please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share my videos with friends and family. Sharing is caring, so stay tuned for more exciting content.